Alright, Shalom. This is Brother Gabar. And before I hop into this lesson, first and foremost, I would like to give all praises to the Most High, their true Paleo-Hebrew names and in the Paleo-Hebrew tone. So with that, I would like to say, Call Halayim, like Yahweh, Bahashim, Yahushua, Bahashim, Ha-Rakah, Kodash, Ma'amaf. Double honors to the apostles and elders of GMS. Double honors to my elder as well, Ahara One Bling Asherala. Shalom to the Akim, the brothers and the women and children that sincerely believe. Alright. So today this lesson is coming out of the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 7. And I'm going to start at verse 1. It says, a good name is better than precious ointment, and the day of death than the day of one's birth. It is better to go to the house of mourning than to go to the house of feasting. For that is the end of all men, and the living will lay it to his heart. All right, so the scriptures say it is better to go into the house of mourning rather than to go into the house of feasting, right? In the house of mourning, man, consists of, sighing and crying, against the abominations of this place, the wickedness of this place, the wickedness of our people, sighing and crying against our own flesh and our own mortal thoughts, all right? Sighing and crying against this captivity and wicked rulership that we under, all right, and mourning, for the day of the Lord, and it says it's better to go into that house and give mind to those things than to go into the house of feasting, because these other nations and 2/3 of our people, in that mentality of being in that house to feasting, man, just living it up, partying and living it up and living in a sin and transgression and abominations and idolatries and, ultimately just general wickedness, man, just living it up in this wicked kingdom, in this wicked society, in this wicked world. All right, it's better to go into the house of mourning and to mind those spiritual things than to go into the house of feasting, only minding the things of the feast, man, and the feast that's prepared on the table of that house of feasting, man, is the lust of the flesh, man, the lust of the eyes, the things of this world, and ultimately all just tie into wickedness, man. That's the thing presented upon that table, in the house of feasting. All right, but the Lord is saying it's better to go into the house of mourning, man, sighing and crying, spiritually, man, against this place and all the wickedness and things that lie therein. All right, it says it is better to go to the house of mourning than to go to the house of feasting, for that is the end of all men, and the living will lay it to his heart, man. All right, and it's like, man, the house of feasting is like, it's like that thing when they put a frog or a toad in a boiling pot, and they put them in the water, and then they steadily increase the temperature, but the frog don't know he being burned alive, because the heat just gradually being turned up, so he don't hop out the pot. That's like the same thing with the house of feasting, man. They 2/3 of our people who in that mentality, they're gonna stay in that house to feast and not realizing that the heat is constantly being turned up by the Lord Yahweh Bashem Yahushua, ultimately to the heat and the burn of 200 million nuclear missiles, man, all right, in the midst of World War III, as it is prophesied for this place, Babylon, to be destroyed by. All right, that house to feasting is the end of all men, all right, because your hearts, your minds, they get destroyed in that place, because you can't see anything, outside of that house, the windows blacked out. So all you can see is what's in that house, man, which is just folly, sin, transgression, mirth, and wickedness. All right, it says, for that is the end of all men, and the living will lay it to his heart, man. The living, those alive in the spirit, shall lay this to their heart, their mind, and remember that, it's way better to sojourn in the house of mourning than to go into the house of feasting, in the house of mirth, where it's nothing but folly and foolishness, towards the Lord Yahweh Bashem Yahushua and his ways and his word. All right, verse 3, it says, sorrow is better than laughter, For by sadness of the countenance, the heart is made better, man. All right, so it says sorrow is better than laughter. For by the sadness of the countenance, the heart is made better. And that heart is your mind, man, because when you're in like a sorrowful state, man, you in a, 9 times out of 10, when you're in a sorrowful state, you're in a state of reflection. You know what I'm saying? A state of reflection, self-examination, so on and so forth. So it's better to be within that state of mind and state of being, so your heart, your mind can be made better, versus being in that spirit of just like mirth and laughter, within this society, within this world. All right, because that's what 2/3 of our people do, man. They go into the house of feasting, that house of mirth, right, and just be entertained and amused by the things of this world, whatever it may be. You feel me? To the point where, that's all they caught up in. To the point where they, they never really reflecting on matters of the spirit, And it says, verse 4, the heart of the wise is in the house of mourning, but the heart of fools is in the house of mirth. All right, so the heart of the wise, that the hopeful elect, those seeking the Lord, Yahweh Shem Yahushua, their minds is going to be in the house of mourning, man, in that spirit of, man, sighing and crying against this place. All right, sighing and crying against, this flesh, sighing and crying against, the wickedness that's upon this earth, man, sighing and crying at the state of our people. You know what I'm saying? Sighing and crying against their own mortal thoughts, man, in this captivity, and just the general wickedness that has befallen the earth, man. All right, but it says, but the heart of fools is in the house of mirth, man. And you can see 2/3 of our people are in that spirit, man. Their minds is just completely within this world, completely in the amusement and the entertainment and the quote unquote pleasantries, you know what I'm saying, that this world has to offer, man. Completely disregarding the things of the spirit, the things of the Lord, Yahweh Shem Yahushua, man. All right, in verse 5 it says, it is better to hear the rebuke of the wise than for a man to hear the song of fools. All right, it is better to hear the rebuke of the wise, right, man. Hear the rebuke, the correction, the chastening of the wise, right, which is the men of the Lord, through the spirit and through the word of the Lord. Or it's better to hear the rebuke in the correction and the chastening of the wise, right, because that'll make your mind better towards the Lord Yahweh Shem Yahushua. So it's better to hear that than to hear the song of fools. All right, because the song of fools is just gonna man, just rock you to sleep, and I mean rock you to sleep within this world, man, to where you just completely asleep and dead to the Lord Yahweh Shem Yahushua, to where you're not pertaining unto the things of the spirit, where you're not pertaining unto the things of the Lord, where you're not pertaining unto things of knowledge, wisdom, and understanding, man. All right, that the song of fools is ultimately gonna lead you astray. All right, so it's better to hear the rebuke of the wise, man. All right, it's better to continuously hear that, what I'm saying, if you got to, than to listen to the song of fools, man. You know what I'm saying? And con, man, that was pretty much this lesson, man. It is better to go into the house of mourning than to the house of feasting, man. Going into the house of mourning, minding the things of the spirit, man. All right, than to go into the house of feasting, minding the things of this world, And con, man, I ain't gonna say too much, just a quick lesson. And con, man, with that, I'm gonna say shalom.